Okay, let's talk about the comparison spiral. My goodness, this is a constant for sales. You're constantly comparing, right? Online or in your dashboards. And comparison, if it's not a competitive, natural way to like compete with your teammates, it can erode confidence and it can distract you because you're more focused on what the other person is doing versus what you should be doing. So there is definitely a fine line between great, competition in the sales team and having that competitive culture within your organization and also doing like, like the public ranking. And I'll tell you, one of my biggest motivators was when I was working in one particular organization and I was the number one, sales rep for X number of, years. And then I had one gentleman beat me out one year by 18,000 in gross profit dollars. I still remember to this day because I literally was like, oh, this is not ever happening again. That was the motivation that I kind of needed, but that was fun and it was in good spirit and good nature. But that's that fine line. Like, how do you prevent that comparison spiral?
Yeah, yeah. I'm laughing because I'm like, And how many years ago was that?" It's funny what you came to.
That was 12 years ago.
Just exactly. I remember the moment. Yeah, it is a fine line, and, I think one of the first things to recognize is that just because everybody holds this common role of being in sales doesn't mean that they are all motivated the same way. And again, from a leadership standpoint, really understanding what motivates the individuals on your team and not making an assumption that everyone, because they're in sales, loves, having their stuff on blast on the dashboard. That might be really difficult. Now, is it necessary? Is it part of, how we stay on top of things and how we move forward? For sure. So it might not be an option to be like, that doesn't motivate me and I'm going to opt out of the dashboard. But from a leadership standpoint, if that is something that doesn't necessarily, that's not the way that the person enjoys or is motivated, um, understanding that can be critical to weave into your conversations and to just, again, keep a little bit of an extra eye on that person when they aren't maybe at the top of the rankings, because you know that it affects them a little bit differently or more. And from an individual standpoint, that's important to know too. What does motivate me? What does kind of sap me in terms of competition? And the difference that we see in the research as well, will underscore, is around shame. So, shame is a very natural human experience. Nobody likes to talk about it. I'm sure even as I said that word, that folks are like, "Ooh," cringing at it, like, oof, I don't, I don't want to talk about shame. But we need to talk about it because when we don't talk about it, it gets to fester kind of in the dark corner, and take control of our thoughts and our subsequent actions. And we all experience shame, which is this feeling and this belief that we're not good enough, that there's something wrong with us, that we're inherently flawed. And it's kind of two voices that you're not good enough. And who do you think you are? So those can be really prevalent when we're talking about competition, because it's a slippery slope between what you kind of talked about, like, oof, I'm going to 18,000, like, okay, I know my targets. I know I got to work a little bit harder. I know what I'm going to do differently. And oh my gosh, I suck. What is wrong with me? I couldn't even 18,000 and I couldn't even do that. Oh, I should just give up. I bet everybody thinks I'm a failure. Like, and you can even feel the energetic difference as I'm saying it. One is like very crushing, and shame, from the research, is very difficult to kind of climb out of. It gives us nowhere to go. And it slows us down. It pulls us out of connection with people, with our purpose, with our goals. Whereas the other that you're talking about, true, like kind of competition, can be really motivating. So I think from a personal standpoint, recognizing what's the narrative that's playing in your head as it relates to competition. When you're looking at that dashboard, when you're falling short on your own targets, what is that narrative? And we have control over that narrative. I mean, it's the first automatic response, we don't. But we have control over whether we allow it to stay and linger and we treat it as truth, or whether we kind of push back and we go, it's not what this is about. I worked really hard, you know, clearly Bob worked maybe a little bit harder or had a different circumstance, but I'm still really good at what I do. And I'm going to use this as fuel for motivation moving forward. And that's how we stop that shame narrative in its tracks.
Ashley, I think that was so insightful, actually, eye-opening to me because you're right. Like you think that competitive spirit is a natural sales characteristic, but there's this whole other side that you're talking about with the shame, and it's not one size fits all. So, that's a great share, and actually, it definitely makes me rethink about when you look at these leaderboards and dashboards and how effective they are, and if there's a different way to actually, manage to that.
Yeah, they're absolutely, I mean, so shame is a very internal thing that we're experiencing at different points. However, as leaders, as managers, how you talk about the leaderboard, how you talk about the rankings or the misses, that can you can choose language that feeds into shame, or you can choose language that sort of acts as an antidote. Again, like the person may still experience shame, but your language really matters. I mean, leaders are so influential in terms of what people believe about themselves and about their disappointments, their failures, where they sit on the leaderboard, et cetera. So if you're able to use language that isn't about the person, but really keeps it about the situation. And so rather than, saying things that are disparaging about the person and where they're at the leaderboard, use it to talk about their work and their efforts and like what they can do differently. So separate the person from the behavior, essentially.
That's great. Great. Thank you so much, Ashley. I think that was very insightful for sure, and definitely a great tool for sales leaders.